Maybe. I'm not sure what just happened, but I think we're streaming live. And if we're not, we're going to find out about it. Um, Hi, everybody. It is me, LOAF, and Chris Reed. And I just want to make sure that this is actually broadcasting before we start. If we're not, we're going to find out about it.
I think we might be good.
I hear me talking, so.
I'm muting that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, folks, if you give me just one moment, I seem to have hidden my YouTube chat somewhere, and that ends up being pretty important for these. So, Chris, how was your week?
It was good. It was fast. It's Labor Day weekend now, which is pretty great. So first day of school for the little ones.
How did they take school?
Oh yeah, my daughter loves it. She said it was super fun. I asked if she had a fun day. She said she had a super fun day. So good.
All right, well, would you do me a chat and do me a favor and watch the YouTube chat, because I seem to have accidentally hidden it in some way here. So let me know if anybody has any comments or questions.
I see the YouTube chat.
All right, cool. So hey, everybody, welcome to another kind of informal playing around stream. As you know, we're restarting All Wings Considered on the 26th, but until that happens, we're just going to do some of these where we talk through old manuals, maybe play a couple games, whatever. But today we are talking about Voices of War, which is the fiction manual for Wing Commander Armada. And I'm joined by, if all the technology is working correctly, and guys will have to let us know about sound levels and all that, but I'm joined by the man himself, Chris Reed. Hey, Chris.
Hello. I've got a real microphone, so I hope you can hear me.
So, Voices of War, what is it?
Voices of War is amazing. Oh.
Nope.
Can I hear you?
Can you?
Oh, now I can hear you.
All right, there's a cat in back of me, as you can see. Lumi. All right. Well, that was exciting. I'm still trying to fix my YouTube chat, so give me just a moment, guys. It's almost like I don't know what I'm doing.
This is like the pregame, the preseason.
Yeah, everybody is seeing how the sausage gets made, and the answer is not especially efficiently. But we do have a great show for you tonight. As we said, our Voices of War is the manual for Wing Commander Armada. There's two manuals for Wing Commander Armada. What can you explain what the two manuals for Wing Commander Armada are?
Yes, everybody wants to talk about Voices of War, and that is exactly what we're here to talk about. But it's not the only manual. There is an often forgotten about play guide, which also has important information. And we won't be talking about it here, but it looks like this, and it does not get the color treatment that Voices of War gets.
All right, okay, I'm back on top now. I've got the YouTube chat. It really threw me for a loop when it didn't automatically pop up, but I can see what y'all are saying. Hi, Mufasa. Hi, Shingo. Hi, Liha. Thanks for coming out. So, recentering my stream brain. Voices of War. So what was Wing Commander Armada, first of all? Armada was a spin-off of Wing Commander 3. Back in the day, Origin had this policy for developers where basically anybody could pitch a game. And if they thought that these games were, basically any lower-level person at Origin could pitch a game and they could run that project if there was support for it. And Armada was one of those. It was basically this kind of tech idea. They had this engine ready for Wing Commander 3. They had all this content ready. And they said, oh, well, what if we make a multiplayer game? And this was before multiplayer was really a thing. Doom had just come out, and then, death matches and so on were huge, and everybody wanted part of that. And, what more natural game to turn into a multiplayer experience than Wing Commander, which, you play with an AI character generally. So, the idea that you could play Wing Commander with a friend, either against them or flying on your wing together, is basically the kind of game that designs itself. And Armada was basically a low-cost project to utilize a lot of the resources that were being developed for Wing Commander 3 in sort of a more risky fashion. Wing Commander 3 was incredibly expensive, and there was some question of whether or not there was an audience of CD-ROM owners out there who were going to play it. So, you kind of amortize that budget by having another game that's built on top of a lot of the same work. So you have a small team that turned Wing Commander 3's engine, or a branch of Wing Commander 3's engine, into a multiplayer space combat game. And it kind of went through a couple of iterations in there where they said, well, let's try to make this more appealing than just death matches. And they added this whole campaign sense. So it has this kind of sort of chess style carrier against carrier with maps and collecting resources. It's not as complex as like a typical turn-based war game, but it's very compelling. It's one of those simple enough to understand, hard to master games that really comes out really well. And one of the other things they did to color this game, because it didn't have a story or a budget for really art or anything, was this kind of lush manual that they called it a fiction manual at the time, and the idea was it was going to tell the story of the war, all this backstory that they did not have the money to show you. One thing I always point out about Wing Commander Armada that blows everyone's minds is there is not a single picture of a Kilrathi in this game. No money was ever spent for showing you what the Kilrathi looked like. There's not a VDU image, there's not a splash screen, there's not art in the manual. They didn't have that kind of money. So this is taking a very inexpensive project and trying to bring it into this big world without, it's purely through text for the most part. Maybe one or two illustrations that we'll see, but it's a massive effort, and it is incredibly impressive for what it did for the Wing Commander universe. And with that, let me make our names disappear, and I will have it pop up right there.
I can feel some... It really is crazy when you put it in context, because we're talking about only less than 4 years after the original Wing Commander came out. You've got Wing Commander 1, 2, the spin-offs, Privateer, Academy, and then pretty much Armada. You don't even have people with really modems or internet access or things. This is 1994, years before a lot of people even had dial-up internet. And here you have a multiplayer game that can be played over a network and other things. And they did a lot. Even though it's such a tiny budget game as you described, you've got this multiplayer, you've got this different strategy engine, you've got this manual. So pretty amazing.
There's a lot of incredible stuff in there, and when did you first play? What was the first time you played Armada? Tell me your first Armada experience.
Yeah, for me, it was an Egghead purchase, Egghead Software, which was one of the, you had all of these literal boutiques, electronics boutiques, software, et cetera, all of those kind of places. And it was one of those ones where there's no internet, so you don't know what's coming. So there's, sometimes they've got signage boards outside the places saying, there's this game coming this day, this so forth. And so through that process, I found out, there's going to be a summertime or a early fall type game before Wing Commander 3. So managed to pick it up, and this was on, I basically got like a 486 computer for Wing Commander 3, but no Wing Commander 3 yet. So this was the game that I was actually going to play a well-equipped computer on. Had some trouble with the expanded memory, getting all of that going, but that was normal at the time.
I'd also had just recently gotten a 486. It was one of those Gateway 2000 486 66s. It seemed like the most exciting thing in the world at the time. I think I got it for Privateer because I had a 286 before that, and I could not play Privateer. But I do have a very distinct memory of getting the call from the it was not Egghead, it was Babbage's. The Babbage's
Hmm.
at Columbia Mall in Columbia, Maryland. And it was like, they called me at like 7 p.m. on a school night, and I begged my mom to take me to the mall. So I remember reading the manual all the way back home and then having Armada matches all night before middle school. So good memory. Good memory there. Mufasa says expanded versus extended memory, the great debate. I still don't
Hmm.
understand anything like that. I can manipulate the numbers, but I don't understand the science behind them.
Yeah, yeah. Like extended was just kind of a given, whatever that means. But you had to type the numbers in to get the expanded right. And if you didn't, for some reason, you didn't get all the nice stuff.
So, of course, the Wing Commander series, even by this point, had already sort of a rich history of these lore manuals, starting with the original Claw Marks, and then the Privateer manual. There was a Jones update in Wing Commander 2. Privateer had the Frontiersman, which was supposed to be a, you know, mercenary magazine in the 27th century. Claw Marks was the newsletter for the Tiger's Claw. And then we have this, which is a little bit hard. We'll talk about the setup. But first, let's take a quick look at the cover. We've got this beautiful, I believe it's a Chris Douglas rendering of 3 arrows attacking the Karathi carrier that's protected by a pair of Dralthi. This actually can't happen in the game. You can't have 3 human fighters against 2 Karathi fighters, at least not until Proving Grounds. But that's fine. But the other thing I love about this manual, in addition to the beautiful 1990s layout, fonts, everything, this is pitch perfect. We just developed desktop publishing, and here's what we're doing with it. It almost looks like a menu for a Las Vegas nightclub or resort or something. Um, but at the risk of focusing on the 6 words on the page, both sets of them are pretty interesting. Voices of War as the name for the document in general. What does that mean? And just the expression Confederation and Empire sounds so cool. Like a history book written 50 years later that's describing this conflict. So it really sets you up with this page to enter into some 90s sci-fi.
Very 90s colors. That magenta and teal, those accents, those were hot colors back at the time.
Yeah.
If you were opening a movie theater in 1994, that's the colors your bathroom were going to be.
And as usual with Origin stuff, this was before the game industry had shifted to using outsourced professionals for anything like this. If I were making a video game manual today, I would pay, video game manual company to do it for me. Back then, it was entirely in-house. This was edited by the great David Ladyman and written by Tuesday Phrase, one of Origin's technical writers, and she did this. She did the Karathi Saga manual. She did a bunch of like longbow stuff, the Wing 4 PlayStation manual, all sorts of stuff. And it's another case where, at the risk of going into some more elaborate theory, I think it's really valuable, especially in the 90s, to have a woman's perspective on the lore. There's something transcendent about Wing Commander when you have, Siobhan Beeman and Ellen Guan doing Wing Commander 2. Freedom Flight just has such a different feel to it than the Force Gin novels or
And Diane Duane for Privateer 2.
yeah, Diane Duane for Privateer 2. You can go back and forth about anything you want otherwise, but I think it does add a permanence and like a different perspective of the universe that makes it so much better in retrospect. I remember kind of chafing at that in like when I was like 11. Like, oh, Hobbs stuff is so, I don't know, girl. I don't want to say girly. It's not anything like that. It's just much more. It's not the blow things up action story you've come to expect. And again, here we're going to see all these very human perspectives that maybe you wouldn't get in otherwise.
Human and very human Karathi.
And the other thing that's incredibly exciting about Voices of War is that, so in 1991, they did Wing Commander 2, and they built an insane amount of backstory for Wing Commander 2. They had all sorts of, they did a series Bible. They had all sorts of documented stuff about how the Wing Commander universe works, how the pseudoscience works, and so on. But very little of that was published. Wing Commander 2 is very much a reflection of a giant, they kind of worked out the universe and then only reflected it in slight in Wing Commander 2. And that material didn't really stick with Origin. Wing Commander 3, Wing Commander 4, Wing Commander Prophecy is not built on that Bible document. It's very distinct visions from different teams. But that did go to the folks doing the novels. And part of that was this very elaborate story for the Kilrathi, backstory for the Kilrathi, where we learn about their, in Wing Commander 2, you see the Emperor and you see Prince Drakath, and there's some court politics implied. But you had this whole system set up with the 8 noble clans that rule Kilra and how they vote to do this, and there's backstabbing politics here and there and there. That was all in the novels entirely up until this point. And this is a really special manual in particular because it pays full respect to the 3 Wing Commander novels that have come out already, Freedom Flight to End Run and Fleet Action. And it reflects back all the stuff that's established in them. So in addition to just having, we'll see there's a timeline that has the events of the novels, but it also has all the backstory of the novels, the Kilrathi with their base 8 system and their specific clans are all named again. So this, for nerds at the time, this was super exciting because it was totally respectful of our arcana. Imagine watching a Star Trek imagine turning on Star Trek Next Generation and it references a Star Trek novel from the 80s or something. It doesn't happen in big franchises so much. So this was something that I think earned our loyalty for that reason alone.
I think it helps set the tone so that then there's a future expectation that later games do comparable things.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see they do. When we get to, I guess our next one will have to be Victory Streak, the Wing Commander 3 manual that came out 3 months later. And there's some interesting connections there, too, that we'll talk about at a later date. But let me go to page 2, which is blank. We can do this one easy. I love when the PDF people include the blank inner page. There's absolutely no reason for that, but good on you. So often they would leave out the PDF versions of the manuals in the 90s would leave out the cover and the back cover, which sometimes had content on them. But for whatever reason, this perfect Armada PDF has the blank pages and all the styling.
That's a Wing Commander fan that scanned it.
I think this is Born Digital because we've had.
Oh, is this one of the original ones from the versions that didn't come with the manual?
Yeah, the first. This is the blue disc version, I guess you say. The very first budget Armadas came with the manual in something called VB format, VEBE, and I don't think I knew how to run it then. I certainly don't know how to run it now. But later releases included this as a PDF, and it's just a perfect PDF file. As far as such a thing can be, it's 2 megabytes, and
yeah, that VEBE thing was like an executable. That's a weird way to get your manual.
Yeah, and it was MS-DOS based. It was 16-bit. You had to load it up separate from the game and read it on your screen. Back before we had multitasking. Let's see. Mufasa says, do we know how long it took them to write this one? A project like this would have been a month or less. Single writer, single editor. And in fact, one thing we have that we'll talk about a little later is an earlier draft that is just a few days before this one, but it has a couple of changes that we can note. But until we get, let's start with, this is actually probably the weakest page. I hate these so much, but I will, on our Confederation Handbook streams recently, we talked about how the Confederation Handbook did not include the Oath of Service, but
it's a bonus here. They didn't even advertise it on the cover.
Yeah, well,
how get it right up front.
No sticker on the box or anything crazy. But yes, here is the Confederation Oath of Service and the Kilrathi version, which is simply titled the Kilrathi Oath for some reason. You just take all this. You take this oath to be a Kilrathi.
Service is implied.
But here we're supposed to be getting across the philosophy of the two nations, and setting up for how this manual is going to be divided, because it's going to be showing us the human perspective of the war and the Karathi perspective of the war, and it's got that very 1984 sense that neither of them is really the truth. They each have a version of reality that doesn't quite come together. And I say that as it is the point of the book, not some continuity error I'm defending. But the thing that's always bugged me about these, and actually these two are better than the one from the Wing Commander Academy manual, which is like the Wingman's Oath, that is just so specific to how the game is played. And you don't...
The Wingman's Creed.
Yeah, Wingman's Creed, and it's like, well, you don't always have one wingman. In the reality of the Wing Commander universe, you're going to be fighting all sorts of missions. It's not one. Yeah. But they're just kind of corny poetry, and I'll read them.
There is I'll point out the watermarks behind the oaths. Is this one? It's one of, if not the first time you'll see this version of the Confederation Star and this version of Karathi iconography that will then appear a ton in Wing Commander 3 and on throughout.
Yeah, that's something that these lore things do incredibly well. I mentioned how Wing Commander 2 is like a lensing of their conception of the Wing Commander universe. They do that with emblems so much in this series. There is never a point where we just sit down and say, this is the Confederation flag, and this is the roundel, and this is the Karathi Imperial logo, and this is the Red Claw logo. It's just, it was decided behind the scenes, and then it's just used. And it's very consistent because of how they do that, and the fact that they don't ever directly tell you what it is. But this is the first time we would have seen the Confed logo as this origin logo jump point thing. There's flags you see in the back of the Wing Commander 2. There are logos and roundels on the ships in Wing Commander 1 and 2, but at most you can see a yellow star on the Concordia, and it's not clear what it is. Is that the 14th Fleet's logo? Is that the Confederation Star? It's never said, and it's very consistent starting here that this jump point is the Confederation military logo. And meanwhile, the Karathi one is even more complex, because that is the Kiranka or Red Claw logo. That is the Karathi symbol that specifically means Thrakath's leadership group, Thrakath's regime. And then you've seen the larger Empire logo that's all the clans together, and you'll see it in Wing Commander 3. It looks kind of like that, but more of like a raindrop-y thing. But let me read this terrible poetry. I am the heart of the Confederation, a servant of peace, a deliverer of freedom, a guardian of worlds. As I pave the road to victory, I shall not fear the enemy, for he cannot conquer justice. It's very much it's like the Dune. I will not fear is the death, and so on. As I light the righteous fire of peace. Nod to the Privateer add-on that would have just released a couple of months earlier. It was February or March 94. I shall hold life sacred, for it is my duty to rise against evil. In my comrades I do trust, for we are one another's eyes. Even in the face of death, we wear our rank in faith that justice will right all wrongs. I guess I've always thought this is pretty corny, but now that we see like an actual war going on in like the Ukraine, everybody's posting crap like this to Twitter at each other. So,
well, you have to wonder, when did the Confederation adopt this oath of service? Who were the enemies that they were rising against, the evil that they were rising against before the Karathi?
It's very specific to seemingly the situation you're in. And of course, the Karathi oath. My heart does not know fear, for I am a servant to Sivar. My claws do not know shame, for I am a warrior of Kilra. My clan shall not be disgraced, for I serve my Hrai and Lord. Get some questions about what exactly they think Hrai means versus clan, and I don't think they'll ever be answered. With my tongue I offer fealty, with my claws I unsheathe victory. With my mane bowed I lie down and offer up my life for honor. So, and this is honestly one of the first times we've seen first-person stuff from the Karathi, and it's it's very Klingons. It's
1994 would have been prime, like right after those big Star Trek Next Generation episodes where we really got into Klingon history.
And I do know from talking to the team that the one thing the Wing Commander 1 team stopped for crunch was to watch Star Trek Next Generation. So they would work pretty much straight through the week until when it was on Thursday at 10 or something. Everybody would stop for an hour and then they go back to work. And this is probably interesting only to historical nerds like us, but the last episode to air, new episode to air during the development of Wing Commander 1 was Best of Both Worlds Part 1. So, and Part 2 came out, I think, right after the game shipped. So, must have been an interesting time. All right, now here's the page that I never thought much about until recently, and it's been keeping me up at night, honestly, the last couple weeks. Everything else in this manual is taken from the background, the implied background of Wing Commander Armada. It's bits and pieces that were collected from the Lexington and the Chirac, and it's showing us the two sides' perspectives. This page is not. This is the page that is written in universe, but for us, and it's about what the two factions are, how they're at war, and how the war is still going on. And all those are really, really important facts for trying to understand what this is. I don't have a definitive answer, but I have a pretty interesting one. So we know from much later manual, Star Soldier, that the Lexington was never recovered. At least as of 2701, no one knows what happens to the Lexington. So all the stuff that's collected in this is not... So we know that the Lexington is not recovered during the war or for about 50 years after the war. We also know from this that this is contemporary rather than someone telling the story of the war years later. This ends with the war. The timeline is going to end with the war still going on. So this was written in 2669 or by someone who has no knowledge of what happens at the end of 2669. And it's pretty egalitarian in terms of what it says right here. It's not we were attacked, the Terrans were attacked. There's no we. It's referring to the two factions as separate things, which implies it's some third party. So, is this some other nation? Is this the Nephilim or the Mantu or some other race has recovered the Lexington in this data or intercepted it in some way and put this together as an understanding of the conflict? I don't know, but it's worth thinking about. And
it's in black text versus the red versus black text used later on. So if you're casually reading it, it might imply the humans wrote this, but
it does seem like it's humans, because we have that kind of established here visually that the two Karathi are red and humans are black. But again, it's not specific to it addresses Terrans in the third person. By the way, Terrans, this manual uses Terrans so much versus any other Wing Commander thing. It's kind of interesting to see. But we've got some interesting lore here. The idea that the Karathi is nestled in the Orion Arm of the Milky Way is pretty consistent with other stuff, but that's also reality. We are in the Orion Arm of the Milky Way. So that fits with the later maps we see. This bit here, a year and a half's travel from the Terran base of Earth is where the base of Karathi culture is. That's kind of odd, because what does that mean? It's certainly not with jump points.
Yeah, it's like I'm about 3 hours from Portland, but...
And you're about 3 hours from Austin. So it's both meaningless and fascinating. And then this bit here also, the Karathi have possessed interstellar flight knowledge for the last century. That is not consistent with any other description of the Karathi ever, including one that we're going to have at the end of this manual. Both of the ship guides at the end of this manual say that the Karathi have possessed spacecraft for roughly the same amount of time as humans have. So, again, what interstellar flight knowledge might be specifically jump drives or some other technology, I don't know, but it doesn't quite work with anything else. Hundreds of planets is pretty consistent. They've encountered other life forms. That's pretty consistent with the novels. This is an interesting bit of the sentence right here, though. None could compete with their scientific knowledge. This is the first time you ever really hear the Karathis having scientific knowledge. And we know from like action stations they have, we know they have scientists. There's this Karathi scientist in the Academy manual, and we know they have slaves that they force to develop advanced technologies. But this is kind of a weird take on the Karathi, that the races like the Hari and the Wu and so on just can't compete with their scientific knowledge rather than their military might. Until they ran into a Terran exploration party in, and you can see the continuity error right there. They are trying to.
On the very next page, it's going to talk about
Yeah, it's gonna,
2629.
It's going to correct it on the next page, but it should be 2629. And this is a common thing because people mix up First Contact with the start of the war because they're 5 years apart. But this should be 2629, not 2634, which again maybe implies that this is some more distant look at this. This is not someone who is intimately familiar with time, human time. Terrans likewise had befriended several nearby worlds and quickly assimilated them into the Confederation. That's pretty consistent with the books. All were advanced, but none possessed technology that could rival of that of Earth's, which, why would that matter? Terrans and Karathi had experienced wars between their own people in past centuries. Tools were already in place when they crossed paths in 26. They didn't even need to get to the next page. This one's 2629. With a new outlet for frustration and hatred, each side rapidly unified after the first few encounters. Now, after almost 30 years of continuous war, which again, this is 2668 when this book starts, so it seems like it should be more than 30 years. But that's another one we'll see get wrong all over the novels and everywhere. And in Wing Commander 3, because when people were writing these stories, they rarely know when they're actually happening. But after almost 30 years of continuous war, the Karen and Karathi have arrived at a stalemate, with the Karathi gaining slight advantages in sectors with tactical jump locations, which I think is a reference to the end of Wing Commander 2, where they capture the Deneb sector. Still, this fight pits humanity against honor and survival, compassion against the deliverance of justice. I don't know why we keep hearing the word justice in here. Nothing about warfare seems just. I've not been paying attention to the chat. I need to look at that right now. Were the Source WC2 3D models more clear about the logos? They're not especially clear because the Wing 2 models typically just have the yellow star, and they're all specific. There's a star that appears on them, but it's just a basic star. There's one on the Ferret that's red, and then the Concordia has a big yellow one. So there's not anything that's on every single ship that you say, oh, that's the Confed logo, or oh, that's the Karathi logo.
It could almost be like squadron logos or nose art or something like that.
Mufasa says it might have been written by a young Chris Bear in middle school writing a paper the night before it was due. Well, because it's too old. It's 2669, so Blair. When this exists is right when Blair is going to the Victory. So he's in his late 30s, early 40s, depending on the book. All right, let's look at this timeline. So, one of the reasons this was so exciting is because the first Wing Commander timeline appears in claw marks, and it's done very loosely and cleverly to avoid kind of filling in any of the details. So instead of being just here's a list of things that happened, it's this happened 20 years ago, this happened 15 years ago, this happened 5 years ago, and they do them as separate call-outs. This is the second iteration of a Wing Commander timeline, at least as far as when it's published, and it expands everything greatly, updates everything it takes everything from claw marks, updates and edits it, and then expands through all the games and novels that have come out so far, which, again, was super, super cool to us.
This is a very, very, very big deal, because we've seen a bunch of manuals and games now, and nothing really brings them all together until this point.
Yeah, Wing 2 didn't have a timeline. Wing 3 didn't exist yet. Privateer didn't have a timeline. Privateer makes very, very little reference to anything that happens in Wing Commander. But there's all sorts of fascinating things here. First, the idea that the Karathi use base 8, which is something that we see in the novels already. Fortune's Karathi use base 8 for everything, and he took that to mean quantities of 8. So instead of 2 dozen, you say 2 8s or 2 80s or 3 8s, and it's fun figuring out the math while you read. It's some of that math that's just easy enough for you to do in your head, but you don't really want to. This takes the idea a very different, more literal way, which is that they have taken the numbers for the human years, 2629.105, and they have run them from a base 10 to a base 8 converter and given us that number instead. And I remember years ago trying to figure out, well, if it's the year 5105 in Karathi terms, and they have at least this many orbits, can we figure out when their recorded history begins? But no, it's just every single one is just the Terran one in base 8. So you can't really discern too much from the Karathi other than that numbers are weird. And right off, so for each one of these, we're going to get the update for the Karathi and then the humans, and you get to compare them. And it's pretty compelling. Like here, the Karathi version of the First Contact is that their destroyer the destroyer K-Wrath Khan is exploring the Kratna sector, which I guess is Karathi for Vega sector. And they think the unidentified ship is trying to neutralize his shields with wideband radiation, which is a direct reference to the Angel's Pencil in the original Warriors story from 1966, Larry Niven's Origin of the Zinti, where that is what they do to destroy the alien ship there, is they neutralize its shields with their communication laser. So that's basically just a like wink and a nod that yes, we did steal the Karathi from there. When the enemy fails to leave the area of trespass after 3/8 of an hour, the destroyer opens guns to eliminate the threatening vessel.
So it's great. They have the concept of hours is consistent, but this is 3/8 of an hour.
Yeah. Although is a Karathi hour the same as a human hour? I don't know. I'm not enough of a time scientist to figure that one out. And this is very, very similar to the claw marks version. It does introduce a same but different continuity error right here. Claw mark says it's 2629.105 March 15th Terran reckoning. This says 2629.105 March 16th Terran time. Neither of those is right. It is April 15th. April 15th is the 105th day of the year. I'm not sure why they further uncorrected it here, but it's almost certainly one of those ones just nobody ever thought about. Then we have the Karathi start of the war. Encounters with this unknown race continue as exploration ships cross the normal Karathi patrol routes. Vessels are noted for have external firing weapons and are attacked on sight to prevent further penetration into Karathi territory. Captured debris indicates the ships originate from the Terran Confederation. After drones radio back images of a colonized planet 3 trillion eights. Like, that's not even a unit. That's not a unit.
There's eights.
It's eights.
3 trillion of them.
Eight what's? 3 trillion eights. Starward, of course. Starward is an amazing name, amazing word. But who knows what eights are? The Emperor decrees that Karathi forces are to search out and eliminate this strategic colony. It turns out that's referring to McAuliffe and not Earth. The Imperial military draws up plans for a massive attack on the colony and its orbital space station. Resistance is greater than expected. 3 carriers and many 8 of fighter craft. It appears that the enemy's technology parallels Kora's knowledge of spacecraft and intersector jump mechanisms. For 4 days, the Karathi battle the Terran forces into retreat, then return victoriously to Kora. Leaders predict the forces will conquer the alien race in 7 moons. Yeah, Katrain points out he doesn't think the trillion has a real meaning outside of base 8. So, again, Karathi numbers not that well thought out. But as you can see here, this is the story of the McAuliffe ambush with the part where the Karathi get beaten left out. And then the human version is pretty much the same as claw marks. Good old Chess M. Penny, Space Station Alexandria, and so on. I will say, if you're interested in this story, I mean, obviously there's action stations, but the translated Japanese Super Famicom version of claw marks adds a bunch of events specifically to McAuliffe that add even more bits. We have that at the CIC if anybody wants to check it out. And now we have the one that I certainly rue and lament, which is they have updated the story of the Enyo engagement, 2639, to, for whatever reason, they've called it the McAuliffe ambush, which was the previous thing. Like, do they call it the McAuliffe ambush here too? No, they don't. I don't think they do. So they've changed the names around a little for
So
no
the
apparent reason.
2634, the third paragraph, so begins the McAuliffe ambush engagement.
Okay, yeah. So it's not.
And then in 2639, first paragraph, this triggers the McAuliffe ambush engagement.
And all they've done here is, for whatever reason, almost certainly accidentally, they've replaced Enyo engagement with McAuliffe ambush. And I did a post on this recently where, yeah, the two systems are next to each other. This could all happen at once, but it's a weird thing, and it gets carried forward in every future manual until we fixed it with Star Soldier. Victory Streak will take this version, and it's going to update it and add a bit about Talwyn being in command, but it still says McAuliffe. But other than that, this is all pretty much the same as claw marks. And here we have another continuity error from claw marks. Another just weird error. Claw marks has in 2644 the Tiger's Claw is doing its shakedown cruise and it encounters the Karathi invasion and turns it back. And it has in 2649 Custer's Carnival 5 years later, which the Tiger's Claw is involved with. The folks here confuse the two, and they put Custer's Carnival in 2644, which again should be 2649. Just a number error.
I do like the 20. It's going back to 2639 that the Raptor class heavy fighters are carrying porcupine space mines. That's a nice touch.
It is. That's also in claw marks, and I think they were really proud of the fact that the Raptor had a special weapon because it matches the game so well. And no one ever wants to use that stupid mine in Wing Commander 1, but it sounds so much more exciting when you read about the history of how it was used in this epic battle to trick the Karathi, which, much like Seether's mine maneuver in Wing Commander 4, isn't something you can do in the game. But 44 is just the same as the Custer's Carnival stuff in Wing 1. A couple word edits, but nothing meaningful other than the wrong date. But here we have the Karathi take on Wing Commander 1, which is so very interesting because they have, from their perspective, they were there in the Vega sector to enslave the Mopox, the little aliens in the Rostovs, these little red guys. That whole game was specifically about them trying to take those slaves, they claim.
The Vega Sector Star Post, an Imperial starbase, is built for this.
Which they locate, and the base is... And again, this is great backstory. It's not something from Commander 1. This is additive. The base's security commander is executed as a traitor. Are they a traitor? No. But apparently that's who took the blame for the loss of the Vega Sector, the Venice system. After a prolonged battle with the Terrans, the Emperor orders the command relocated to Kilra. This is kind of an idea we already see in Wing Commander 2, where at the end of, I think, at least two, but maybe it's both expansions, but we always have this scene where it seems like you've won, and then you have Thrakath and the Emperor talking, and he's like, "What do you have to report?" And it's like, "So, stupid fools played Secret Special Operations 1 instead of going where I actually was," and they're like, "I'm pleased." It's that same idea that from their perspective, things are entirely different. Remy says, you shared the file via Twitter earlier, and I was loving reading, particularly the Karathi side. It's super interesting, isn't it? And here we have this is where the timeline is totally new for humans, and that's what's going to carry forward. They're going to drop all the Karathi stuff for Victory Streak and onward. But here we have the human story of the Vega campaign with a specific date, which, and I have that timeline I've been working on that has the very, very, the day by day of 2654 that has kind of Wing Commander 1 with everything overlaid onto it. And this is an important part in setting that up because this is 2654.287 is when we take this as when the Tiger's Claw gets to the Venice system. And then 325 is when the battle actually ends. Because that's going to show up in a bunch of other places. But, this, again, for people doing timelines, that's an important one. And you see even here, it says it takes weeks to end the battle. Another good one is that this is Secret Missions 1. We learn that the Karathi Sivar weapon is an atomic proton accelerator gun, one of many wonderful new kinds of made-up weapons in Armada specifically. But just great trash lore here. After magnetically buffering all radio waves to isolate the selected planet, life removal experiments proved successful. And they got the Guinevere is there. And at the end, Prince Drakath becomes the heir to the throne, which would be the most interesting part of this for the Karathi. And then again, here, 0.326, that's the day after the Vegas campaign ends. I said 325 earlier, is when Secret Missions 1 starts. Again, that's all.
How do you think the atomic proton accelerator gun squares with the Super Nintendo Secret Missions 1 reference to 137-fold gravity?
Oh, yeah, very, very good question. Yeah, so the Secret Missions 1 for Super Nintendo adds a new introduction cutscene. Certainly blew me away the first time I saw it. But it basically has the Karathi Admiral and his lackey talking about how they're going to destroy the planet Warhammer 12 as a test, and they fire the super weapon, and it crushes the planet by increasing its gravity 137-fold, which maybe that's what that's what an atomic proton accelerator gun does. Why not?
I mean, if your protons are accelerated fast enough, then that's a 137-fold increase in gravity.
Mufasa picked out life removal, which just a great euphemism. Not even a euphemism, just a... You could see modern politicians using that. So, story of Secret Missions 2. And this is another weird one. Why is Secret Missions 2 going from 2653 to 2655? I guess that's how long they were negotiating with the Ferekins before the Tiger's Claw got involved. But this is all pretty consistent with the games. And again, the Karathi Imperial Guard pushes the enemy out system after Prince Drakath deems the Ferekins unworthy of destruction. Nothing particularly thrilling there. And here's the Vegas, or the 10 years between the lost years, summed up in Karathi terms. They don't mention that the Garkar has rebelled. It fell into human hands. They order retaliatory strikes to eliminate any surviving cowards, which is, of course, actually to destroy the stealth fighter facilities. In the following moons, the Terrans lose many eights of ships in Enigma sector, failing to dislodge the Imperial presence and the headquarters of Tithrak Mag. After an 8 of sun years, Drakath ceases the attacks on Gorakar and relocates the Imperial headquarters to a hidden location outside Enigma sector. At the same time, spacecraft research culminates in the production of stealth fighter technology. And again, nothing too exciting here, but it's nice to have all this codified. When did
Is it a weird back, so in the first paragraph, Drakath orders retaliatory strikes, but that happens after the stealth fighters are developed, right?
I think I'm thinking that this is written from the perspective of the Karathi who don't acknowledge the retaliatory strikes prevented the stealth fighters from actually being developed then, and it took all those years to get them back again.
Oh.
So this is when the Straka actually come online years later, in 66 or 67. Which again, here's the origin of, at least in canon, the weird date for Wing Commander 2. Wing Commander 2 starts saying it is in 2665, and Origin's internal timeline, for whatever reason, decided that Wing Commander 2 would take a little over 2 years, which is not the feeling you get playing it. And it's kind of very similar to Star Wars, where Lucas was very cagey about exactly how much time took place, in episode 2 and 3. How long are the Clone Wars? It took years to figure that out. And here again, it's entirely possible for Wing Commander 3 or 2 to take 2 years, but it stretches the timeline in a weird way, and this is where it's codified forever, and it'll be super permanent in the Karathi Saga manual, where we get specific dates for things like Jazz's trial and the destruction of the Githrak Mang station and so on.
Wing Commander 2 just really likes to use a lot of time. Just the entirety of putting Blair in system security for a decade is just like doesn't care. It's just going to use up a whole dozen years.
I think there's an element to that where they're saying they're promising not to do it again. You know, they're saying, okay, they obviously came up with this idea to kick you back to having to rise in the ranks again rather than being the hero. And they're kind of promising you with the 10 years, this is an exceptional thing. It's not going to happen to the character every time we need him to go back to the basics. At least that's how I always read that in Wing Commander 2. Hello, Leslie James. Wing Commander 2 was a 2-year game. Are they including the expansions? They're not including the expansions yet, although we'll find later in the timeline that those just take a matter of weeks. It's the Special Operations 1 and Special Operations 2 both take place, in the 6 weeks after the end of Wing Commander 2. But this is specifically, you get a date at the beginning of Wing Commander 2 for the first mission, which I think is 2665.110 or 111. And so that's April 2665. And then we get all this lore later that says Wing Commander 2 ends in February or March 67. So it's 5, 6. Okay, so it's almost 2 years. It's a hair under 2 years, which seems crazy to me. I guess there's a lot we don't see when the Concordia is just moving around. But no other games take up that amount of time. Wing Commander 3 is a couple of months. Wing Commander 1 is a couple of months. Wing Commander 1 is 8 months. Wing Commander 4 is 2 or 3 weeks. So it is weird that they give this lazy timeline to Wing Commander 2. Yeah, it doesn't feel like 2 years at all when you're playing it. There's plenty of places where you can say, oh, there's a missing month, but you don't get that sense when you're in the story. That's pretty linear. Then we have the take on the Karathi. Here's the Special Operations stories, this is the Karathi version, which they're concentrating their efforts on vital jump points to the human homeworld, which is the capture of the Deneb sector. In the next moon, Sivar tests Thrakath's skills as a leader by staging an assassination attempt and giving him over to the Terrans. The prince proves his worth by escaping with the help of spies and reassuming rule over Kilra. That interests me for a couple reasons. One, because this is something that never gets mentioned starting with Wing Commander 3 afterwards. But at this time in the continuity, it's kind of treated as a big deal that Prince Thrakath is taken prisoner on the Gameljan in... not the Gameljan, it's the Bonnie Heather in Special Operations 1. It seems like kind of a silly, small universe thing the first time you play it, where you happen to run into Prince Thrakath and he gets locked up and then he escapes somehow. Maybe he was being guarded by Hobbs and he escaped somehow. It probably should have been a red flag at the time. But it's mentioned here, and the Karathi perspective is such a big deal. And there's a scene in Fleet Action where Thrakath is bickering with Yukaga. Did I just try to pronounce Jukaga with a Y? That was weird. Baron Jukaga, and he's like, you were never a prisoner of the Terrans as I am, which to me immediately builds this story in my head that Thrakath takes this tiny little incident and he's like Lyndon Johnson with his silver star about it. It's the biggest thing in the world. It wasn't, I rode on an airplane in the military theater once. There were Zeros coming up on after me and I shot at them, and Thrakath seems to be making a lot of hay about the fact that he escaped from this very basic situation that he honestly didn't ever have to tell anyone about.
It's a wonderful phrasing to say Sivar tests Thrakath's skills as a leader by staging an assassination attempt and giving him over to the Terrans.
Which again is just such a that's PR talk. That's how the Karathi tell their people. He commands one last attack on the Terran starbase of Olympica and obliterates Gorikar's few remaining colonists. Like, that's interesting because it certainly seems to imply that. And, I guess Gorkar does get bombed in the story, so they're just not mentioning that they withdraw. And here's the human version. We've got the Rigel Pirates. That's the Gettysburg stuff. And an Imperial leader named Khazra tries to assassinate Prince Thracath. Thracath is captured and brought aboard the Bonnie Heather, but escapes shortly after. Maybe he did have to tell people because it would have been human propaganda. Oh. Finally, a desperate attempt against Olympic Station in Gorkar is thwarted, saving the rebel Karathi planet. Leslie James says, since Hobbs went rogue in Wing Commander 3 after the trigger word, does that mean a different one that didn't totally erase his personality was used in special operations? It's possible, or maybe Prince Thraka, I don't know exactly how Karathi personality overlays work, but he may have had like a debug code. He did origin-k him or something.
Or maybe he was just really, really good at escaping. He's a Houdini. Got out of the prison. Or maybe the Bonnie Heather just didn't have a very, very elaborate, secure prison system.
Yeah, maybe he's telling the truth, too. Maybe he did knock Hobbs out, and it wasn't related to Hobbs being a traitor. I guess that's certainly how they felt at the time. But Remy says Blair basically got sacked because nobody believes the Tiger's Claw was blown up, but Hobbs is fine despite helping the freaking prince escape. It's true. All right, and then here we have the novel stories worked into this, which, again, was fantastic to nerds like us at the time, to be told that the expanded universe stuff mattered. And, it didn't matter, but that lip service is so nice. That the ability to understand how to do that lip service to fans has been such a boon for folks like Star Wars as an IP. They are so good at telling you that, oh, well, these novels matter. You need to read these novels. Star Trek is very bad at that. They're, the novels aren't official. Well, less people are going to buy them. Lie to us. We want to be lied to about this stuff.
This is great if you were one of those people that read the Wing Commander novels and you had friends that didn't. They would get caught up and on the same page.
I don't think I have any friends that didn't read the Wing Commander novels. At least not anymore.
That's true.
But there are some great numbers here which have served us well and made people angry over the years. They've destroyed 7 escort carriers and 2 fleet carriers and 24 eighths of other ships. Just good stuff to build in that empty part of the timeline with. The new cast of Hakaga carriers. This is the story of fleet action. Launches a climactic attempt. And, of course, they end with the warheads bombing Earth, but don't mention that they had to retreat, which seems to be the same thing for all of these Karathi stories. It's always, we did what we came to do, and then we left. And the human version is great. And timeline here. Because Wing Commander 2 takes such, really a year more than it should, it pushes the novel stuff into a weird Twilight Zone. So at the start of End Run, you need to have, quote, 2 campaigns, or roughly a year after. That's what Bear says. He's been promoted over the last 2 campaigns, and it's been about a year since the Gettysburg incident. But we have Fleet Action, which we're now told takes place in 2668, and it is a year after End Run. So everything gets a little squiggy when you're timelining that. But a year after End Run which again is the same thing in the novels. A year after End Run should be Fleet Action because that's how long Chukaga was in exile for. But you'll all see that on the big timeline. We'll share that later, and you can.
And it's funny because Wing Commander 2 gets to take 2 years, and then you have to pack in novels.
Yeah, you have to get everything.
Armada, Wing Commander 3, Privateer, and maybe even Righteous Fire into this little late 2660s.
Yeah, Righteous Fire is another one that doesn't know. So when Righteous Fire was made, they didn't know that the war was going to end in 2669. So it starts with the super title that it is a year after Privateer, which started in 2669. But that would be 2670, and the war is still going on, seemingly. And we'll see this when we talk about Wing Commander 3 later, that when they were developing Wing Commander 3, they had no idea that it would be set in 2669. That was something that came up at this stage, in the manual writing stage. There's some lore hidden in Wing Commander 3 that implies they expected it was 6 years later, that it was 2676 or 75, which would have made all of this a lot easier. But that never got really repeated ever. What should I mention here? So this is a nice description of fleet action. The list of cities that are destroyed, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Boston, Miami, Quebec, Berlin, Paris, Kiev, and others, is straight out of fleet action. I was curious about this just recently, so I checked to see if they added any cities here. They did not. And that's our timeline. And you see we end with not the war ending, as you would if this was a history, some later history. It's ending with the attack on Earth. And we go to the memoirs part, the next part of the manual, which is now, instead of this third-person timeline from each perspective, we're seeing individual documents that have been taken from these lost ships. So if folks aren't familiar with kind of the setup for the story of Armada, in so much as Armada has a story, there's a couple ways Armada has a story. One is the gauntlet of both sides, where you hunt down the other ship, and it has a little story with there's traders and everything in there. Traders, pirates, all the Wing Commander stuff, and it's all done in text. There's also kind of like the base gameplay of the campaign of Armada, where there are 11 preset sectors, and you have to basically checkmate the Karathi in each one to win, and you destroy the enemy homeworld. So zoomed out to the, overlaid story aspect of it, the idea is that the Confederation is sending a ship behind enemy lines to, and it's not specified so much here, but it will get codified in Star Soldier and elsewhere. It's deploying a 62-person special operations team that is going to be involved in destroying Kilra. And of course, we know now that that's special operations team is Angel and the prototype Temblor bombs, setting up the stations for Blair and so on. So the Lexington's job is basically to go behind enemy lines, release this captured Kilrathi transport that has Angel's team on it, and they're going to take care of all the stuff that's necessary for destroying Kilra. The Karathi perspective is that the Karathi are deploying these like berserker carriers across enemy lines, and they're just supposed to attack and do as much damage until the war is over. And the Shirak is one of them. It's so they're sending these crews on these. Each side is sending their crew on a suicide mission, and we're going to be seeing the reactions to that through this document. And with that, let's get started. So Commander's Log, we're going to see a couple times. The protagonist, if there can be said to be one, is an unnamed commander. The man who will become the captain of the Lexington. I think we assume his rank is commander because it's called Commander's Log when he's still a pilot in the Concordia. He is what you might call a near Blair, which is something that shows up a lot in these manuals, where they want to have a character who sounds like he's Blair but isn't. So this is a guy who knows Angel, he knows Tolwyn, he's enemies with Tolwyn, he served in the Concordia, he was friends with Kakai, Shot Glass gave him brass wings and so on. He's got all these Blair qualities, but he's never explicitly Blair. The Academy Manual has exactly the same thing, where Captain Jack Lombard, it's Jack Lombard, it's not Brian. Brian Lombard is Lightspeed. Jack Lombard is the new Academy director, and his story is all, he had an affair with Angel, and he was friends with Hobbs, and he knew this and this and this from Wing Commander 2. But the story also is that he's been burned terribly and can't fly anymore, so it's not Blair. It's near Blair's. But a bunch of interesting continuity stuff in this one page that I'll start calling out here. First of all, we've got this typo. Hakaga, which they got right earlier, is called the Haraka Carrier Force. You can lure that off anyway.
You can say that our commander here was just not a good speller and didn't have an ear for the Karathi language.
Or Haraka is the name of the force, and Hakaga is the class of ship. This is just the only place that mentions the Haraka. And again, this is set up for Wing Commander 3, sort of, but again, it shows us how tight the timeline is. which is that the Concordia is growing rickety after years of abuse, and it's been placed on indefinite patrol status Code 4, and it has now spent 8 months. 8 months. So it's been 8 months, and this is still 2668. So it's been 8 months since the Battle of Earth. So the Battle of Earth has to happen in early 2668. We'll figure that out as we go.
If you ever get an opportunity to talk about this, you should Mugato Gumato this in like Lower Decks did, where you find a way to introduce the Haraka carrier force as distinct from the Hakaga class supercarrier.
Yeah, the other conversation we were, of course, everybody knows that. On Affair with Angel, she cheated on Colonel Blue Hair. So it's not, it's implied, but he's, I think the comment in the manual is that he had to be reassigned because Angel was too much of an alluring woman or something. So it's not necessarily saying that it was reciprocated, but he's kind of a lame pilot. He can't fly with Angel because she's hot. Let's see. And again, in fact, if this is a near Blair, he again ends saying, I wave goodbye to my quarters and envision beaches, blondes, brunettes, and banana daiquiris, not to mention a promotion or two. But the one I want to point out here is this paragraph here may be one of those just technicallys that has saved Shotglass's life. Because we have here his statement that that's the brass wing Shotglass gave me after Catithrek Mang. But the Tiger's Claw was destroyed at Catithrek Mang. If Shotglass was around afterwards, it would have to be either after the Tiger's Claw was destroyed or after Catithrek Mang was destroyed 10 years later. He had to have survived Catithrek Mang. So this is the technically Shotglass can still be alive. At the tall, thin Frecken Chalice, my feathered friend Kakai gifted me. Of course, that's Blair's Frecken friend is Captain Larry. Kakai is Hunter's pal. Hunter's already dead, so this can't be Hunter. I know what you were going to think. Oh, it could be Hunter. It's not. Hunter's dead. And here we have the Kilrathi equivalent, which again we're built. We never see a picture of the Kilrathi anywhere in Armada, but we build so much of their lore, seeing them interact in these little letters back and forth. And this one's the setup. They're supposed to report to the Temple of Sivar on Kilra to prepare for their suicide mission, and they're going to have a big party, and the Prince Dracath is going to address them. And Remy just said, oh, wow, yay, I love that Shotglass could still be alive. And that's great. I used to think, oh, if somebody in fiction dies, it's lame to bring them back. But do what makes you happy. Bring back good characters. But again, we hear about their religion and this nobility aspect. Thrakath is going to give the surviving offspring of this suicide mission partial nobility. They'll receive preferential appointments. Basically just like being a senator's kid. And all the women get to be preachers. And with that, and again, note the clans. For all that your mind is telling you that you've known the 8 Kilrathi clans the whole time, you haven't. Wing Commander 1 never mentions them, other than that he's Rala Narhalis. There's no Kiranka or Ragitaga or Kakski. This is the first time all these words are appearing in something from Origin rather than one of the novels. But, again, like ranks like Baron are right from the novel, the noble clans, the Narcoxi, the Narwagitaga. And then we have Train Sim Challenge. This, again, a reference to the train sim in Wing Commander 1, which is the little simulated pilot thing that you start the game in. And, this is just some pure background lore to show that these human beings are enjoying themselves as they prepare for their death, I suppose. But we've got some great lore in here. Camden Payne is the hollow vid star. So this is this movie star that I think gets mentioned a couple times in here. One weird aspect of... first of all, we keep hearing about wings. Shotglass gave him brass wings. The prize is platinum wings. I don't know why wings are such a big deal. It seems like it's just part of your uniform. Like, if I went to work and they were like, hey, we've got a great contest for you to win a mouse pad. I just need that anyway. But the other thing I'm saying the other thing as if there's not 10 other things. But This manual uses dollars instead of credits, and it shortens them to DOLS, DOLS. And we'll see that throughout. Which also, I think Fleet Action uses dollars also. So the person, I guess we don't even say the person because it's Tuesday phrase, she must have been just coming right off of Fleet Action for all of this. And these must be little references to people who they knew at Origin: Mary Lancaster, Dane McAllister, mention of Freck and
It's a great
Firelighter.
spelling of Mary.
It is. That's Merri. And then we go into this one, which is a prose story that is basically telling the story of one of the Kilrathi. So while the commander gets his logs, the Kilrathi that we're following, who we'll see at the end, basically gets these little prose sections.
Remy has a question.
Oh, sure.
Could it be that dolls are a different type of currency than credits? I would say, why not? Because you absolutely have multiple currency systems throughout, coexisting in the world now.
Yeah, and one setup for the Confederation that they did in Privateer Online was the idea that it is an actual confederation. It's not just a different word for federation because they didn't want to sound like Star Trek, but the different planets all have radically different systems, and the Privateer Online pitch was great because it was basically intended so they could reuse stuff from Ultima Online too. So there would be planets that would be like medieval kingdoms, and there would be ones that would be high-tech utopias and everything in between. Which I love that idea. It never gets on screen, but I think this speaks to it, that there could be dolls and creds. Or they could be the same thing. Who knows? We have different words for the same thing too. So either one really works. It's one of those things where your first reaction is, oh wow, that's a continuity error, and think, well, it doesn't have to be. And by not having to be, we expand the universe, and that's what we're all here to do. But this is great. They're imagining hunting zebras or space zebras. Maybe they're the zebu from Privateer 2. Striped beasts. Basically just describing this goodbye party for the Kilrathi. On my own breast I proudly boast the heavy red and gold shield of Kurutak, my home clan. Thracath gives a speech, and they all board their ship, and they absorb their last glimpse of Kilra. By the way, the next time we're talking to Emu Music, and he's looking for how central is Kilra to Kilrathi society, it's everywhere. It's in the Oath. It's here. This member of the Kurutak clan is missing Kilra. Kilra is important to Kilrathi society. Paladin is right. Another commander's log. We still are not behind enemy lines. He hasn't even gotten to Lexington yet. But it's interesting to learn all this kind of just description of how a Confederation military transfer works. It's this very brief look behind the scenes, how he goes through a transfer station and meets with a general and taken to the secret concourse and so on. And here again, another character from Whole Cloth who relies upon our knowing what other Wing Commander characters are like, which is General Sturtevant, a stern associate of my old troublesome Commander Talwyn. So this is literally just copying and pasting Talwyn for us right here in lore terms. It's telling us, here's another guy who's the same, but he's a general now. And he's supposed to bring in a crew to report to Goddard as soon as possible, and he sends 6... This is one thing that we retcon later, but Armada really sticks to the idea that the Lexington has 62 people on it. It'll be referenced a couple times here that he's literally inviting 61 people to come be the crew of the Lexington. We retcon that as that being the special ops team with Angel, and actual ship has a ship's crew. Because 61 people and 18 fighters is not going to destroy Kilra.
Seems like it'd be hard to run the ship.
By the way, it's the new year now, and we're being very careful with the dates. I found this when I was timelining this out. It's January 12th now. The orders he's gotten are dated January 11th. They're thinking very carefully in terms of where all this goes in the first few weeks of 2669. Ship 133B, that's something I see the community pull out for expanded reference. They call it CV 133B. which is possible. One thing we always get is this the same Lexington as Wing Commander 4? No. Is it the same Lexington as Fleet Action? No. Is the Wing Commander 4 Lexington the same Lexington as Fleet Action? Yes. Is that explained in the Wing Commander 4 novel? Yes. So at this point, if you just read Fleet Action, it ends with the TCS Lexington, just a regular carrier, being destroyed. So it makes sense that there would be a new Lexington, Ship 133B. What we then establish in Wing Commander 4 is that while this is all going on, the hull of the original Lexington is taken out and constructed and built back into a ship. That's the ship we fly off of in Wing Commander 4. So there's lots of Lexington confusion, and that's where it starts. But it actually, by the time the Wing Commander 4 novel does specifically have this explanation that it's different from the Armada Lexington. So it was always intentional, but it does seem like a retcon. Great, boilerplate legalese here. Terran's, again, here's real focus on saying Terran instead of Confederation or Confederate. Everything in this is Terran. Fine of $25,000. Report by January 18th at 1700 hours. Return date not yet determined. Estimated to be 4 to 6 months. And here we have... here's the introduction of our Karathi character, Mankron Arkoksky, who is going to have an experience that makes him doubt everything about their fighting the war. And this is another description of the big party. One I always like to pull out here is my mate, cousins, and couplings, and there's a missing word here for sure. My mate, cousins, and couplings, I feasted, it should be a with, I guess. I feasted on fine Ferecan roasts and drank a Vaku. A Vaku we'll hear about later. There's a CCG card that's too much Vaku that gets a Karathi pilot drunk and taken out of the game. But the word Ferecan roasts is, are they literally roasting Ferecans? Or are they roasts prepared in the Ferecan style? And with the Karathi, it could be either way. But I will note that still is an implied continuity error compared to Freedom Flight, which says the Karathi don't cook their meat. Kira is horrified to find that the meat he's being served in space prison is cooked. So maybe they've become fans of roasted Ferecans.
Yeah, they've adopted that after their exposure to the campaign.
They were like, these are delicious when we cook them. And that is the Karathi discovery of fried chicken. But here is a very big one that I think we certainly missed at the time, and I think most people miss ever. The first reference to the heart of the tiger. There is only one human we find not to be weak, a warrior whom we know as the heart of the tiger. And we'll see in the Karathi Saga Manual, Thrakath mentions, it's a name given to him by the lesser clans. And so apparently that is what they refer to Blair as. As you know, this was a couple months before Wing Commander 3, so the name was already decided, the stuff had already been shot. It was going to be called Heart of the Tiger. Briefest reference to claw marks. I give my claw mark of honor. There's just lots of cool stuff in here. I love this phrase, as Karathi used the word jeweling to refer to a promotion. The jeweling to Leader of Arms also swells me with pride. He's been promoted to Leader of Arms. And you can tell how proud he is because he signs off as Mankron Arkoksky, Leader of Arms. I also just like the idea of this big 7-foot-tall space cat writing in his diary about how he wishes he could kill Mark Hamill. And who among us hasn't? Here's our human commander again. I forgot to call this one Commander's Logs. But, by the way, I meant to say, I think his rank must be Commander, so he must be a Navy officer. I don't know. This one always weirded me out. It's interesting that they went to Goddard, which is supposedly, is the planet that was destroyed 10 years earlier. The colony was destroyed. So apparently Goddard has been recolonized and has a Confed military base. But the reference here that the moon of Goddard is called Stelkta always stuck with me because it's it's just background lore, but it sounds so close to Steltech from the year when the Steltech were in everybody's minds. I don't know why. And, probably entirely unintentional. I always love this when you get to see what the fake computers are like, and this was made in the terminal Usenet sort of an era, so everything is very Telnet inspired, I guess you'd say. And here they got the ship name wrong. They're thinking of Wing Commander 3, which would have been they were working on the manual at the same time as login victory/security 1. Should be Lexington. But again, it's an enlistee number. It's January 18th now.
And the go-aheads for the, I bark out the usual go-aheads, seem a little bit similar to what the VDU displays when you're booting up a Wing Commander 3 fighter.
Oh, yeah. The Wing Commander 3 stuff is taken from Batman, but the same stuff. Apply gravity, engage main thrusters, check comm network. Just that Star Trek sense of, let's see what's out, the ship leaving space dock, and they get it in a paragraph here instead of a $1 million ILM shot. And, here's a question. Why do they have this file if it's going to self-delete in 8 minutes? Whoever is doing this has some good data recovery. And for whatever reason, we get to meet another commander. It's Admiral Hancock, who is separate from General Sturtevant. And apparently, this guy likes Admiral Hancock. Yeah, the official orders are cut from Sector Fleet Admiral Price Hancock, a title we'll never hear anymore. Okay, yeah, rank commander. This mission entails highest level of security. It's a lot of more boilerplate stuff. We've got more dolls. You were to jump through Kilrathi Jump Point KL-23 and proceed through uncharted territory. You were to seek out and destroy all Kilrathi forces you encounter. You were to locate and eliminate the home world of Kilra. And without the Wing Commander 3 backstory that gets added to this, how are they going to do that?
Very cool that a jump point gets a designation, a name here.
Yeah, and that happens occasionally, especially in the novels or like in the movie, you'll see a display with a name for a jump point. Unfortunately, when you try to chart them all out, you have like 0.005% of the total jump points named, but it is very. I certainly love adding that stuff to the knowledge base. And here he's describing a computer from the 80s. I watched the lines slowly melt from the phosphorus green screen, wondering how I'm going to tell the crew we'll probably never go home again. Again, he's got an Apple II in there for some reason. And here's our first very slightest nod to the actual gameplay of Armada, kind of kludging it in here. If resource levels become critical, explore and mine suitable planets. Of course! Lots of aircraft carriers can do that. Here's his log entry. Again, we hear these 62 men and women, 18 ships, an almost self-sufficient carrier. One last jump to God knows where. And, this is, again, his lonely ship of command. He talks about how great Admiral Price Hancock is again. Why? Again, a character we've never heard of. He will never be mentioned again after this paragraph or so. Nothing crazy interesting here, but I do like this last overly prosaic bit. Like a fledgling moon loosed from an uncharted planet, so do we head into the dark bowels of the universe. Always good to get bowels in there.
Next time we set off on an adventure, we'll have to quote that.
Or not. Staying away from the bowels. Next part of the Kilrathi story, here we hear about. We have another spelling error. We've got Akra leaves instead of Arak leaves from Freedom Flight. But the setup here, which we kind of join in media res, is that the Kilrathi carrier has captured a human pilot, and they are going to interrogate him and then send him back to Kilra to be executed. Which apparently is a big deal for whatever reason. The prince wishes to make a public spectacle of this Terran. Morale among the commoners has been lessened by recent setbacks on the front lines, and the clans whisper of revolt, which matches perfectly with the setup for the Wing Commander 3 novel, stuff in Fleet Action. Perhaps if they tear apart a human captive and feast upon its hot meat, they will unify once again. So we've got bowels, we've got hot meat, we've got it all. And just remember that that was the plan for this guy, that he's going to go, his hot meat is going to go be feasted upon. So they're going to interrogate this guy. We know very little about him. The stranded pilot had run out of fuel, probably missing a jump rendezvous with his mothership, and drifted into the path of my carrier. Towed in by beam, he was unable to resist chapter. Thrakath had been most pleased by this news. And to me, this, again, feels a little bit small universe. You know, it's one guy. The Kilrathi are shooting down hundreds of enemy fighters a day. There are thousands and thousands of people dying every minute in the war. Why is this one guy? Why does Thrakath care about this one guy? But it matches very much with Thrakath in like Wing Commander Academy in that first episode. That seems very small universe where pre-Crown Prince Thrakath is desperate to break into the Academy's knowledge base for whatever reason. Which I remember seeing and thinking, oh no, is this going to be every week? Is this going to be like, is he Dr. Claw and he's going to have another crazy plan for the humans every week? And luckily that did not happen. But this fits with Thrakath, is what I'm saying. And here we have the biggest nod to our backstory, you know, our Armada gameplay stuff, with this letter to an ambassador from the Enigma sector, who has applied to the Terran Council for Planetary Resources to become a mining planet. And this Galactic Trade Council has reviewed all his information. They have a report about what elements are in his planet, and they say it doesn't have enough to support a shipyard, but he can become a mining planet, and he can provide, I think it's titanium. He can provide titanium for a top secret war effort. An unnamed ship will dock at the planet on, that is, April 1st? Mid-April, late April? And so this planet is providing titanium. Lexington is going to stop at this planet in a couple weeks and get some titanium, apparently. Or, in fact, they say an unnamed ship, which is one of the transports from the game. So that is how Armada works, and we have kind of kludged it into a way that makes sense with how we know the Wing Commander universe works. Hello, Sebastian and Charles. Welcome, both. Okay. Here we have a letter that is from Marbuk to his wife, Mirthaka, and as far as, you know, Kilrathi xenoanthropologists go, this is an incredibly valuable document because it is one of the very, very, very few interactions we see between a Kilrathi warrior and a female on the home front. You know, we almost never see Kilrathi women other than high-ranking priestesses who are often, you know, connected to nobility. This is our one very, very brief look at this sort of a letter home sort of a thing. We do have an older version of this document that's been recovered from Origins files, and I will note that an earlier version of this letter does not give it to Marbuk. It gives it to a different Kilrathi who's not referenced anywhere else, a member of the Ragitaga clan. So that is one of the last changes that was made before this went live. But again, it's like I said, with that idea that there's like a sort of a more feminine voice influencing the game, you have this idea that you can take this soulful moment, this like very real and human idea of him going off to die and writing this letter to his wife. I've left instructions with our oldest coupling to assume my clan duties. Instead of mourning my departure, honor me at each moon's appearance in the usual manner. Blooms of red fracas scattered across the Imperial Deathstone at the temple. Imperial Deathstone is a word that goes hard. But I read that and I immediately think of the Sullivan Ballou letter that they use in like the Ken Burns Civil War. Dear Sarah, do not mourn me dead. Almost the same cadence at the end there. Farewell, my maid of many years. You have brought much joy to our clan and Harai, and my heart purrs for you eternally. That's beautiful. You know, Wing Commander isn't high art in that way, but there's all these moments of beauty hidden in there, and one of the reasons we do this stuff is to find them, and I think that's fantastic. And here we have a couple of like internal ship notices on the Chirac. I don't think this ever actually calls the Chirac until the thing at the end, but these are both fascinating for Wing Commander fans. By the way, we learned so many titles for Kilrathi positions on the ship: navigation leader, speaker of arms, and so on. And boy, do they sound like Kzinti names. Just saying, it really sounds like speaker to animals or leaper at whatever. Sue me, I know one proper Kzinti name. Here we have great world building lore. Our brother forces lost 2 light carriers. What's a Kilrathi light carrier? In battle near Omega Sector. What's the Omega Sector? Along with 74 brave warriors. Again, we're trending towards very small crew sizes. It should be more than 74 warriors in the light carriers. That should be the fighter complements of the light carriers. The message from the last remaining carrier indicates the enemy task force was presumably attempting an attack on a feeding colony on board Rav. Remember that term, feeding colony? Because I'm going to forget when it comes aboard later. But, and again, it's...
Also, Bordrav is the name of a destroyer in the Wing Commander card game.
It is. One of the Kilrathi destroyers from the card game is referencing this. The other one, the Dreadnought is referencing End Run. And Bordrav is, again, here. But this in a couple of words, you have this whole battle with multiple carriers engaging over this agricultural colony in Kilrathi space. And just the idea that the humans are attacking a Kilrathi feeding colony is not something you would think, you wouldn't have a human article about how we're really slaughtering their farms. But, and another one that sets off every lore bit in your head. 6 Salthies torpedoed the Confederation carrier in time to prevent the attack. And again, Salthi don't carry torpedoes, but now they do. And can't you imagine a Wing Commander 1 Salthi with like one big torpedo slung under it? And goes harder in the next one. Security level update. Our reconnaissance Drothek, we remember the Drothek from Wing Commander Academy, patrolling this sector has detected vapor trails from a recently jumped vehicle. And by the way, we will see that the Drothek is a ship in Armada. The Drothek was introduced in Academy as the next generation of Kilrathi ships, and it's being simulated at Academy. You get to play with it. You get to fly the Drothek, and it's just a thing. It's supposed to be this super Kilrathi ship. At the time, in 1992, when Academy came out, they were basically thinking, oh, this will be one of the Kilrathi ships in Wing Commander 3. That's how we're going to carry it forth to the next game. It never got used in Wing Commander 3, but it does go on to be in Armada, so that setup did go somewhere.
Also, a point of clarification of timeline. So Remy in the chat asks about the card game coming out after Armada. So you've got Academy in 92, Armada in 94, and the card game in 95. 6?
95, I think. Yeah, because it was before Wing 4, but after Wing 3.
Oh, right.
But, the point of this part of this is here we're telling our story where the carriers are getting near each other. They know the other one's there, and they're doing this cat and mouse thing in the background. Now we get our update from the commander. We're 5 days into Kilrathi space. Our trillion doll navigation systems. You see, they love dolls and they love trillions. VidCom is another good lore bit. And, again, we have this kind of more emotional, thinky, feeling prose. The crew read the screen and looked away. Some glared at me. Others bore their stare straight into the steel tiles. A few grins broke out amongst the young kids aiming for glory and adventure. No one had the inclination to speak, not even me. That reads just like Dr. Oppenheimer's recollection of the bomb test, the whole Destroyer of Worlds speech that he gave years later. As I passed by and retired to my quarters, half the salutes rang with eager pride, the other half stung with hatred and resentment. What they don't know, what they don't understand, is that I feel it too. Maybe after everyone settles down a bit, I can plant the seeds of heroism. After all, we could all be heroes if this bird ever toasts Kilra. And it does! It does end up toasting Kilra! No one remembers any of you, and no one knows what happened to you 50 years later, but you are all big damn heroes. Hey, Toast! Toast is in chat. Torpedo would be longer than the Salty itself. How long is a Salty? It would be longer than the Salty in the movie version. I think the fact that the Wing Commander 1 ships are ridiculously giant works against, because we've heard about 10-meter long torpedoes, which I think should fit under a Salty.
And the card game adds a nice piece where you can add a torpedo mount to anything, including
true,
like
yeah.
a darkette,
Mm-hmm.
darkette arrow. You can mount a torpedo anywhere you want with the right hardware.
And like Toast says, if an Epi can carry a torpedo. All right, here's the famous one. Here is the closest thing to original Art of Kilrathi we get in Wing Commander Armada in total, which is the letter from a kid to his dad. The kid is named Graham, which always reminds me of King Graham from King's Quest. I'm sure that's totally unintentional. And he has, hey, come Chia, hello. He has drawn a stick figure cat. I actually had a cat with me here for a while to demonstrate, but she has abandoned me. Stick figure cat, and he's got this letter about how he's being a good boy and staying home with mommy, and you know it's just tugging at the heartstrings because you know his dad is gonna die. But the famous part here is that I think you must be really scared, so I am mailing you my stuffed good luck cat. Please bring him home when you're through fighting. We love you a lot, Daddy. And if that doesn't break your heart, you don't have a soul. You know, the idea of this kid's final message to his dad, and he has also sent his beloved stuffed toy on there. I, of course, have the picture of Mr. Cat from the card game here. I remember going to the same mall where I bought Armada a year later, getting my first packs of the card game. I was with my brother Silas, and I think I like looked at him. You know, we used to the kind of pool our money to buy stuff back then. You know, comics and Star Trek figures, nerd stuff. And I think I said, I mean, I know you don't care about Wing Commander, but I need to buy as many of these. I saw the cards at the hobby store. I was like, I need to buy as many of these as I can. Is that okay? And he was like, yes, take whatever you need. So I bought as many cards as I could afford. We opened them there in the mall, and I think he was the one who found Mr. Cat in one of the packs he opened, and he was like, this is adorable. And I was like, oh my God, that is a deep dive. So that sold the card game on me immediately. The fact that we actually get to see Mr. Cat. But Mr. Cat has hopefully been recovered by whoever the collators of this document are. Let's see. Sebastian says the Saltian game is like 24 meters, and Wing 2 the Sarther's 8.3. I think so. Big change. Yeah, Wing 2 understands how long a meter is, and Wing Commander 1 does not. Let's see. So, yeah, even an Epi at 12.4 meters could have a 10-meter torpedo under it. And there are shorter torpedoes, too. There are 4-meter long torpedoes that we hear about also.
Torpedoes.
Light torpedoes, yeah.
We get light torpedoes in Prophecy.
And then, of course, we have the dad's letter back, which is kind of corny, but P.S. Mr. Cat is being a great help. He's perched right here on top of my pillow and guards my bed while I'm out flying. I will add one layer to this, which I found in the original notes file from the early the draft happened to have an index of what the descriptions for all the letters what the descriptions for all the documents were, and this one specifically was letter that Dad finds pinned to his bunk. So just adds the slightest bit of context, I suppose, what was in their mind. Komshia says, do you remember how much you paid for Armada? Game prices of the 20th century weirdly fascinate me. So
I do.
Armada
$52.99 at Egghead.
Yeah, I think that's about. I would have paid between $49.99 and $55. MSRP would have been $60, $59.99. Most chain stores would have locked in their allotment for the games early and gotten a pretty significant discount, which allowed them to sell them for $5 to $10 below MSRP. But they were stuck with those copies of the game. You know, the game financing at the time was absolutely insane for when stores had to pay, which was 90 days after delivery. So Origin would go through these incredibly lean months between when a game shipped and when they actually got paid for it. But deals with places like Egghead, Egghead and Electronic Boutique and Babbage's, and big retailers like Target and Walmart, if you could lock in a big buy of unreturnable copies, you were golden. one of the reasons why Strike Commander was so successful, even though it didn't sell particularly well after launch, but it had a deal that was made with Walmart over a year before the game actually even shipped, where they were going to buy 70 or 80,000 copies sight unseen. So Strike Commander, for all the people out there who battle over, this was a failure, blah, blah, Strike Commander was a giant hit for the time, well before it came out, which was why EA was willing to let it wait. That was a game that paid for itself well in advance. I don't remember how I got here. Mr. Guys.
Price of Armada.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's say $52. $60 if you ordered it straight from Origin. I also have here with me... That's right, I got him. I've recovered him from unknown space. My brother had this made for me years and years ago. It's an actual knitted Mr. Cat. He's got his little shirt. He's got his same paws. And that's been with me forever and ever and ever. I just wanted to share that guy. Oh, I should have shown the pictures of Smudo earlier. Well, next stream. No, I'll do it right now. I got this crazy surprise in the mail from Dennis Mall from the Star Citizen community. He, totally unknown to me, and I got this kind of ominous looking letter. Europeans have they have much more impressive envelopes than we do for some reason. But I got this letter in the mail. I was like, oh, is everything okay? I thought there must be some problem. And there was no note. But what there were in there were 3 pictures of Smudo. Smudo is a German rapper who was a big Wing Commander fan. And he got to have a cameo in Wing Commander Prophecy. He's one of the pilots hanging out in the bar in a couple of the scenes. And he did a photo shoot that, for whatever reason, resulted in David Swafford ending up with a file folder of about 30 pictures of Smudo in different poses, which we have all scanned at the CIC. They were in Joe Garrity's Origin Museum. We got to scan them in super high res. There's a gallery of pictures of Smudo you can get. And Wyborg was nice enough to print some of them out on nice glossy paper and then have contact Smudo and have him sign them. So that's one of those things I didn't know I needed, and now I'm incredibly grateful for. Yeah, Smudo. And it's also great because it's one of those ones that entirely fascinated my wife. She puts up with a lot, but sometimes she'll hear something we're doing and be like, oh, that's interesting. So like when it turned out that I knew Ginger Lynn, that was something she was interested in. And now she's been laughing at Smudo, and we've been watching Smudo music on YouTube, and it's been fun. That's it for my side about Smudo. I do have one other little bit here to share with this letter. There was actually a third letter that was cut from the game that we found in the earlier version of the manual, and I've added it here. It's a little bit of a weird one, and there's even a note in the original document that says, I didn't know you didn't ask for this one. You're free to cut it, and they did cut it. That would have been a note from Tuesday Phrase to David Lederman. And by the way, Phrase you'll see all over the place. A star system on the Prophecy map. There's Phrasian Warsop eggs in the Confederation Handbook. You'll hear the name Tuesday in Wing Commander a lot because of her, particularly the biochemist in Wing Commander 3, Wing Commander 4. Her first name is Tuesday. Mm-hmm. All sorts of references to the lady that wrote this manual. But I just thought I'd share this cut content the same way we did with the movie stuff. Here's some cut content from Victory Streak, which is a letter home to a mom from one of the soldiers. Mom, remember the story you used to tell me when I was 6? The one about how the astronaut launched into orbit to fight an alien, lost his ship, and was then rescued? It ended up that the alien only wanted a friend. Today I realize that your stories always had happy endings that took away my fear. The fear is still gone. Only now I'm the astronaut, and the alien doesn't want to be friends. For the last 3 days, I've wondered how to write this letter. I don't know how to tell you this, but it's likely I'll never see you again. We've been sent into the furthest regions of the galaxy. I can't say any more, except that we're going to be gone a while. I don't mind telling you I'm scared, but it's my duty to follow orders. I want you to take this picture I've enclosed and have it framed for Kev. It's been a while since I called, and I haven't exactly been a decent big brother. Tell him I love him, and that he can have the Purple Heart hanging by my bed. And could you buy a bouquet of burgundy rose lilies for Pop's grave? I always meant to do that, but it seems like I let all my chances slip away. Give my love to the rest of the family. You know I'm there in spirit. Love, Jarvan. And, again, a great human letter. The use of the term astronaut is kind of weird. I wonder if that story is referencing something in particular. But I thought I'd share that. Here we have a Kilrathi commander's log. This is a different Kilrathi. And again, we're kind of implying that these Kilrathi are starting to doubt the war. They're talking about how their family was killed. Here's a way to. Oh, and this is the other Armada or other CCG destroyers, Trackmar. So both of the destroyers in the CCG are named after Kilrathi places that are destroyed by Confed in this manual.
It's a great connection.
Remy says, does Jarvan make any other appearances? No. Most of the characters in this are only for one letter. We follow the one Kilrathi leader of arms and the commander of Lexington, but the rest are just one-off appearances. And you don't even notice it when you're first reading because your brain kind of says, oh, I'm not going to remember names like Azrukan or Kokski. I just assume all the red ones are the same guy. But it is, for the most part, different characters for each section. Leslie says, I want a Mr. Cat. Comshia says, especially after inflation, the prices of gaming back then make me grateful for all they bought me. And the whole warm-up delivery scheme is fascinating. Free real estate for them. Oh, the rapper's name is SMUDO. Oh, Chris got it. Okay, I don't even need to think about that. Coxie Stranger on eBay. Wing Commander underwear with victory streaks. You gotta wait for the next one. This is Voices of War. Come up with a joke about that. And great background flavor here. Medical notice. You have everyone in the crew is supposed to report to the sick bay for which they call a medical suite for a viral patch because you can be infected with something on a spacewalk. Maybe. And we have a medical report that's a letter to the commander from the doctor. You've all seen this interaction in every Star Trek ever where the doctor is warning the captain that morale is going to collapse and they need to do something. Again,
Free pizza on Fridays.
Over 20 men and women have come to me within the last 48 hours, which again, is that a third of the crew as far as they're imagining? But it also sounds nice to be able to just get some anti-anxiety medication. Here we have our final mail drop. So this is where we will get the last couple of letters. I guess that's where they sent the letter to Graham. And here, this is another diary from a different human. This one's a fighter pilot who has just scored their 22nd kill. And, again, a great description. I scratched my 22nd kill mark under the hull of a Gladius. And again, it's somebody in the world of Wing Commander Armada specifically. And all sorts of good call-outs here. They mentioned the Jalthi from Wing Commander 1. And, here we're seeing the human and what they're thinking about the Kilrathi. Once I saw the written language inside the cockpit of a captured ship. Reminds me of written Morse code torn on its sides, slacks of vertical lines, some short and others long, representing phonetic syllables. That was the lore for the Kilrathi writing at the time. It's going to be repeated in the Wing Commander 3 manual, although all the writing we see in Wing Commander 3 is crazy scratches and so on.
Everybody knows Morse code in the future. 700 years in the future, in every science fiction, everybody knows Morse code.
I feel like I knew Morse code when I was 12, and certainly not since then, but maybe if you have better memories than I do. They even commit Zukara for simply insulting their superiors. Check out my Twitter for some details about Zukara and how it's committed. Sorry, my X, the Everything app. Kilra swears loyalty to its current dictator, and even the Imperial bloodlines are themselves divided into clans of sort. This really is the strongest description of Kilrathi social structure that we had at this point. Victory Streak that comes out in a couple months is going to have the Chris Douglas Kilrathi xenoanthropomorphic profile thing, but here this is just describing how they work. I guess this kind of compares to being born on Pluto versus Jupiter or Manhattan Island on Earth. That's again a great pulp sci-fi. Of course, they'll casually mention living on Pluto. As strict as the cats are on social rules, they sure aren't the chauvinistic type. All their religious factions have females in charge. I find this interesting. After all, it wasn't until the late 1990s that we even let women hold high church offices on Earth, which didn't happen, I don't think. I don't think you can have lady popes and minor popes, cardinals, and so on yet. So, just like Wing Commander predicting that cancer would be cured in 1998, they predicted that misogyny would end way earlier than it did. Although actually there is a line in the Wing Commander 1 and 2 official guide where they give the different mission series to other characters, and there's one where they, instead of having it be Prankster and Angel, they give it to Spirit and Angel. And there's this line in their debriefing where they're like, if only they'd allowed all women wings back in 34, this war would be over. And like, did the Confederation not allow all-female fighter pilot missions until some point in the 27th century? So sometimes we think social progress is very fast, and sometimes we think it's very slow. Like slavery in Privateer. There's a reference in Privateer to the fact that slaves are traded in the Gemini sector as though it was the 24th century. And I've always loved that as a lore bit, what it implies about human history.
The name is very interesting. Like, obviously you see a lot of Tuesdays, but this letter was written by Necro Hammond.
Necro Hammond, and I don't know enough about Earth cultures to know if that is some familiar name or if it's just a totally out there origin name.
Never heard of a Necro.
I got to be honest, I always imagined this as a Japanese man. I don't think it's a Japanese name when I think about it, but I always imagine this like kind of young Sulu, eager fighter pilot, very earnest. I don't know if it's the name or not, but it's interesting. This guy just decided to start writing about the Kilrathi. The stacks of vertical lines and seen in a cockpit. That's what we see in the Dralthi in Secret Missions 2. I think I got distracted before I got there earlier. With any luck, I might bag another cat before the day's out and add more meaningless entries into my bank of Kilrathi knowledge. Hey, if I'm lucky, I'll kill somebody else. Like he's very like understanding and respectful about the alien culture, and then he ends with, "And maybe I'll kill one today." Ooh, and this is something that will be repeated in many Origin games from this group and well beyond. I did it in Star Soldier, but the good old Wing Commander classified ads, where we find out what's going on a ship by going through the different things people are listing, the crew is listing. And they're all great, from the HP QR32 wrist computer. We've got all these fake specs for game systems. The Vizio virtual gaming set with optical elicitor, with Storm of Kilra, Vidslayer, and Sector Genie. It's just great background lore that will never matter. This one's horrific. Authentic Kilrathi fangs straight from the Empire. Available singly, in pairs, or strung. Cleared by TCN High Services. That's horrifying. And then some of them are just totally out of nowhere. And it's kind of exactly the same cadence as you'd see in the Confederation Handbook. Change your luck with pocket-sized Jewaldi stones. Ideal for pilots, deckhands. Retail at $5 each. Now selling for half price. So for just $2.50 you can get a Jewaldi stone. What's a Jewaldi stone?
What makes it perfect for deckhands and pilots?
Yeah, it's the kind of lore I love that has no explaining factor to it. It's just there, and you build a world around it in your head. Found in men's barracks, campaign ribbon, pilot's wings again. He's obsessed with the wings. If you can describe them, call. Well, I think they look like all the wings for every pilot.
And the ribbon, the campaign that we've all been on.
Yeah. Yeah, no one on our suicide mission is trying to steal someone else's campaign ribbon. Let's see. And by the way, I don't know if this is actual like classifieds I can't remember what the classified section where you meet other people for dating is, but SWMNSDF22. I mean, I know single white male, but I don't know if NSDF is anything. Maybe it is.
I can't
Non
think of anything.
non-sexual death friend. I don't know. Could be anything. But then again, this the second one is SWF. That's a normal one. And just like in actual ads like this, they're all very tedious. I'm a stargazer, poetry lover, communicator, searching for a compatible heartbeat. The music one, Euro techno percussionist slash guitar duo needs vocal edition. Evening weekends in rec room, no experience necessary. Just cool stuff. All this background is cool stuff, and you can get massages, or last one, is it time for you to get a new will? It's too late for a new will because they've already done the mail drop off, but I guess that makes sense.
There's the prior one is a pro calling all pilots relieve stress and battle fatigue with a rub down from a pro masseuse. Does that mean that one, assuming there's only 62 people, they were budgeting one masseuse?
I feel like if they're advertising it, it's probably not provided by the government. It's probably a case of somebody is grinding. It's their after
someone one of these pilots is also moonlighting
also
with their masseuse license.
Mm-hmm. So here we have the next chunk of the Kilrathi story. Marbuk goes to his liege lord, and he finds out that the liege lord has recorded a holograph of him interrogating the prisoner, and this is the big crux of his story, where we find out that the human had begged them to contact humans and release him, do a trade for prisoners, which again doesn't seem like it was something that ever going to be happen. And 35 years into the war, you should know that. They're not going to give a hostage deal. But holoform, that's a good word. But here we have the actual interrogation and this conversation with the human. I watch as the golden-headed human's jowls open and closes rapidly, releasing a few uninterpretable utterances mixed with words of desperation. He points to a strange emblem on his left bicep, a colored scar of some sort decorated with numbers. It appears to be some type of metal drawn directly on the thin, pale hide of the human. Which would be a good I would get that tattoo tomorrow if we knew what it looked like. Look, all I want for you is to radio this badge number. See, it's tattooed right here on my arm. Just key it out to the nearest Confederate. Confederate is a weird use of Confederate. It's very rare on Wing Commander. And we can work out some kind of deal. I know you hairballs have a few cats stranded inside our systems, and I've got contacts. All you have to do is mention the name Corporal ... I always imagine now that it's Corporal Hades. But, again, this guy's he's not even an officer. He's an enlisted pilot, Which, again, should be a real thing. They had those in World War II. They can have them in the Wing Commander universe. Remy says jowls is such a good word. And this goes on. You're all such damn martyrs, you can't see the meaning of real honor, exclaims the sweaty human. Tuesday Phrase is having a great time with these descriptors. Okay, try this. Put yourself in my shoes. What would you rather do? Die miserably alone at the mercy of the enemy? Or fight like a drowning cat to stay alive long enough to see your family, or hurrah, or whatever you call it? Is that what drowning cats do? Maybe. We actually have one of my parents' cats, Holly, is obsessed with almost falling into the pool. Every time we go there to swim at my parents' house, she runs out and wants to rub our faces while we're in the pool, to the point that we have to catch her before she falls in. So at some point I will find out what a drowning cat is like. And I'll update that in a future stream. Your only choice, Terran, is to honor your god of war and lose your life as a hero. Were I to do as you say, my superiors and Harai would fight among themselves to decide who should claw me to death. Actually, clawing him to death would be much more honorable death. The Kilrathi, as we've learned in other sources, place a particular value on the method of execution. So when they claw someone to death, it's actually restoring their honor to some degree, not as much as allowing them self-death, but much more so than disintegration or being stabbed to death with a knife. I see the human close his eyes, a small splash of red flushing his stubbled cheek. Maybe that's the difference between you and me. We have no god of war as such. The beings that we worship, at least for those of us that do believe in such beings, stand for peace, not war. Peace? Was that the word he had used? I struggled with my thoughts for an instant, remembering that I had almost offered this Terran the privilege of addressing him by name. I scold myself for having weakened at his words. I do not know this peace you speak of, human. War is necessary for our survival. We survive on Korra because we must. When the fresh meat and the plants and the water are not enough to feed our clans, we are entitled to search for other sources elsewhere. Like feeding colonies? Would you not wish the same for your family? I watch the screen as my clone on the hollow strengthens its back. I remember feeling quite pleased with my use of this foreign word for Hrai. The human should by all means have sprawled on his back then. Forepaws to me serving him such a word. Instead, he falls silent and solemnly gazes at my form on the screen. War is not about survival, Marbuk. War is pure hell, fathomed out of someone else's principles and ideas of what is good for the homeland. We fight not for food, but for freedom. G.I. Joe. I doubt you know this word, but it means that all living things have the same right to survival. And here we get suddenly this very interesting bit of Confederation or human history. When we ran out of supplies for our 14 billion plus people, we built self-sufficient hydroponic stations on uninhabited planets. Our scientists searched for ways to streamline and improve our survival skills. Then your people came along and destroyed our colonies. We weren't intruding on anyone else's world. You cats, on the other hand, had take what you want and pay no heed to freedom or life. Do the humans not hunt for food, then? How do you feed the people with these hydrones? Just a really good interaction. Just a fun, interesting interaction. I mean, this is the part of this manual where it all comes together, because we have Confederation finally meeting Empire directly. And of course we go on, and turns out the Kilrathi captain is not so happy about this. He orders Marbuk to go kill himself, which of course he will do, because that's how Kilrathi society works. And I cannot refuse his orders, for I have shamed my liege lord. The punishment he speaks of is the harshest expected of any warrior that fails his duties. My Takar, my human equal, may your fate be better than mine. And this is where I want to remind us that we've already established that his human equal is going to go be made into loose meat for Prince Drakath, or hot meat for Prince Drakath, and never mentioned again. This is a story where the human prisoner does not escape. You know, he's either killed when the Shirak is destroyed, or he is sent to Prince Drakath to be hot meat. And now the movies. We have a human holovid of the week, which is these, and you know, this is super Chris Roberts-y. You know, he loves those World War I style flying movies, and The Dangerous Angels sounds exactly like one of those. And second reference to Camden Payne. You know, there was an autographed Camden Payne poster earlier in the book, and now we find out who Camden Payne is. And it's just such a ridiculous action trash movie. This thrilling saga pits intergalactic super cop against... Should be an intergalactic super cop, shouldn't it? Against a ruthless pirate who makes his living by disrupting commercial trade routes. You know, it's kind of describing Privateer. Yeah, a movie. Their romance takes a unique twist midway through the plot. And here's a chat log. Again, both of these guys have great names. Marika Samia, Jay Frazier. And this is the closest we have to possibly having a name for the commander. The one lady says they can't have dinner. They have to meet with Jakorski. And the other guy replies, meeting with the big man, what's up? Don't know, maybe I'll finally learn what's going on. So it's possible that it's Commander Jakorski earlier. Does that tell us anything? Not really. But that's the closest thing to a possible name for the guy in charge of all this. And no, it's just a conversation about how they're too nervous. And one of them hates the Kilrathi. You know what home is to me? What? A steaming pile of charred cat dung. All because of those damned kamikaze cats. You worry about your home when you still have the chance to protect one. Kamikaze cats is a great expression that should never be used again. But it does refer to the Karathi tactics in the first 20 years of the war, where they were very, very suicidal, throwing their forces in mass numbers against hardened installations. Anyway, they discuss about how maybe Karathi have feelings and they're going to have dinner later. And this is like a weird echo of Bill Forston's kind of ridiculous 90s politicking. You're starting to sound like some of those philosophizing, uppity ambassadors, more concerned with everybody being nice than winning a war we didn't start. Is that the thing ambassadors are known for? Hey, the ambassadors are trying to end this hellish war just like you are, only without all the deaths. That's more than the snot-nosed kids you fly with. They're just interested in their kill scores. Anyway, these two apparently are having dinner, so... Here is Marbuk's final note about how his body would have been discovered, and he has failed in the eyes of the Karathi creed of war. Maybe that's the document we saw earlier. After many hours of deliberation, I find my only recourse to be death. Also, the captain told you to. I was unable to extract anything useful from him. He is a skinned creature of higher rank and wishes to be traded to his liege lord's ship. I infer this means he wants to be exchanged for a similar Confederation prisoner. All right, and that's a series exit for Marbuk Narkovsky. And then we have the note. This is the note that went out to the rest of the Karathi ship. At 4/8 past dinner is a specific time for the Karathi, apparently, leader of Tungs Marbuk disposed of his own life. He failed in his attempts to extract military information from our human prisoner and will not be granted normal burial procedures. No one is to communicate with the Terran until further notice. Any warrior that breaks his command is subject to an isolation sentence.
But not death.
Not death, no.
Just an isolation sentence.
Now that is the end of our story, and we're getting to really the only part of the game that actually matters to the game, which is the ships and guns section that tell you what you can actually use in the game. And they're both done in the in-lore sense of, here's a document that's being sent around the ship by in this case, it's the TCN gunnery officer, who's sent out this guide to the weapons of the fleets. And I won't go into crazy detail about this, but there is some fascinating stuff in how this is put together. So this was the first time, Privateer, we got specs for the guns and missiles, but there weren't so many of them. This is the first time we get kind of a history and specs and so many details for all the weapons. And Armada adds so many different guns, and there are some here that aren't actually in the game. But a lot of them are familiar. This is a mass driver cannon, laser cannon. The parentheses here are the Karathi version. And this is something that's reflected in the actual game. Many of these stats are not accurate because this went to press way before the game was balanced, since they had to do so much balancing for multiplayer. But the concept is right. The Karathi laser does less damage than the human one, but and so on. You have all these little bits and pieces of design that are reflected here that are interesting. But here we have the Karathi flux cannon, and they've invented some pseudoscience for every single one. The flux cannon uses magnetic pulses to track and identify enemy ships. It delivers average damage. The photon cannon that got introduced in Academy, but it is new here. And again, you have human and Karathi versions, and this is the nod to Academy right here. It came into service recently. The neutron gun. The neutron gun is a relative of the mass driver? ? Apparently. Maybe that's why the slug thrower on the movie Rapier is a mass driver or is a neutron gun and not a mass driver. But history of the neutron gun, flak gun. If you played Armada, you run into some flak. Electron gun is a new one. And they have all this lore that's starting to emerge about what guns damage. That's not reflected in the game in any way, but we're starting to have this idea of some guns hit shields, some hit armor, some hit, and we'll see in Victory Streak, we'll see ones that work in atmospheres, ones that don't work in atmospheres. So you have all these rules that never quite go anywhere, but they really build out the universe in an interesting way. Plasma gun Karathi. The Reaper gun, here's one that's always annoying because every later description of the Reaper gun is saying it's a new prototype on the Rapier. Here it's the heaviest gun developed to date. The Reaper gun has gunned down more ships than all other weapons combined. But it just came out! So something happened there. Particle cannon, you all know the particle cannon. tachyon cannon, ionic pulse cannon. A lot of these are introduced in privateer, and like we learned here, the Karathi matter disruptor is the same thing as the ionic pulse cannon. And here, mass accelerator gun. It's a relative of the super collider. It's connected to the Sivar weapon. Delivers light damage using blasts of subatomic particles, which then, increase the gravity 137-fold. And the favorite Armada gun, their big FU to everybody in the world who tries to take sci-fi stuff seriously, the Karathi Sonic Accelerator, which does not actually appear in the game. You can't actually shoot the Sonic Accelerator without a little bit of hacking. But still in the prototype stage, the long-range Sonic Accelerator gun uses a sonar tracking system. Damage potential is low, but it will probably improve in time. Phase Blaster, Karathi, and then, you all know all the missiles. We also get the Karathi brands for them. Paw, Dumbfire, super cute. Stalker, Heat Seeker. Claw, Image Wreck. Fang, Friend or Foe. And then, of course, the torpedoes. The Leech missile is brand new on the prototype Wraith Fighter. That's another nod to Academy.
Did we sufficiently point out the 5 guns that are exclusive to Armada that only show up here?
I mentioned they existed, but I didn't call them out. If you got the list, make it so.
Oh. Well, I couldn't find the list, but I believe it is...
I'm thinking it's Mass Accelerator, Sonic Accelerator, Phase Blaster,
Electron gun, and Flux Cannon.
Flux Cannon, yeah. In fact, they're all the ones that sound totally new. So
yes. Photon Cannon is on the Drothek in Academy. Yes. Yep. Those are the 5 that only appear in Armada.
Oh, you're thinking the ones that only appear in Armada. I was thinking the ones that don't appear at all, which is the Sonic Accelerator.
Yes.
And then following the missiles, we have ships. We have 2 separate articles in the ships. One for and it's reversed. So the humans do the human ships, and the humans do the Karathi ships, and the Karathi do the human ships. And they have changed all the units. So the Karathi use octo-mox instead of meters. And you'll see, I'll just scroll down right now. Here you see this is all the standard Wing Commander data. None of these stats match the games at all. The lengths are insanely high. Shakalar is 39 meters long. That's crazy. This goes back to the classic Wing Commander not understanding how long a meter is. Karathi, they don't ever say Shirak here, do they? They just say, they call it the 23rd vessel, and they call it Karathi carrier. And then from the Karathi standpoint, we get the same document in reverse. It's showing the human ships, and you see they're all in Karathi units. So it's Mox and Octogrammas and Zatmox. Things are in ZMs instead of centimeters. But the other part of this that sticks out, we talked about that 100-year date in the intro. Here we have Confederation spacecraft have been in production for almost 1130 sun years, paralleling our own research. And the Confed one says the same thing. It's the Karathi have possessed spacecraft technology for over 6 centuries, following nearly the same timeline as us. And again, here you see all these guns that were listed in the booklet are... they appear here. Like this says that there are 2 Sonic Accelerator guns in the Shakalar, but it does not actually have that. And here's all of our favorite. And here, when you see these 2 together, you can see something that I took years to notice, which is that the back of the Wraith gets reused as the back section of the Phantom. The Phantom is actually the back of a Wraith with the front of a Banshee glued on. It's a true Star Wars style ugly for the ship. And I feel
the Phantom is just a
mess,
just
all
a dog in every way.
We got the wrong class here for it too. It's called a heavy fighter for some reason, and they mixed it up with the Gladius. The Gladius gets called a medium fighter. Oh, they don't say Lexington here either. Maybe they don't call this the Lexington. Do they not call this the Lexington in the manual at all? No, they don't. They never use the names of the carriers. I certainly never noticed that. That's interesting. But I thought instead of looking through these ships one at a time in text, I would do something slightly cooler. Maybe, if it works. Which was... There we go. Look, we've got the ships and we can spin them around. Eh? See, I'm using advanced VR technology to manipulate this arrow. But I just thought I'd run through the Armada ships and talk about where they come from, because what an excuse to do that. Oh, hey, we've done this for over 2 hours. I told my wife it'd probably be an hour. And she said, no, it'll be more like 2 hours. Joke's on you. It's more than 2 hours. So anyway, the arrow was originally designed for Wing Commander 3 by the great Chris Douglas. And in fact, they ported it over to Armada, and a lot of, if you look at early screenshots of Armada, marketing screenshots and so on, they do all use the Wing 3 arrow. So this was actually modified later. But, the arrow is a beautiful ship. You can't not love the I want to say clown mouth, I mean shark mouth. It's just a handsome ship. There's a reason why this was in an Intel ad. And we've got the Phantom, which, as I said earlier, it's the back of a Wraith and the front of a it's even blue like the Wraith underneath. But here, compare this to the Wraith, and the Wraith was the ship that was introduced in Academy, Confed's super high-tech ship. This was going to be the basic ship in Wing Commander 3. The teams totally changed, and it wasn't going to happen by this point. So it came to Armada instead. But, a handsome spaceship that's blue. The Phantom, though, never appears again. It's my least favorite ship to fly. The visibility is horrible. The guns suck. This is supposed to be the counter to the Shoklar, which is the advanced Kilrathi cloak fighter. I don't think so.
It has no redeeming features, because for
nothing.
a few more resource units, you can just get a Wraith, and then you get the Leech missiles and such better performance.
Yeah, there's no reason ever to fly this thing, except that you have to in a couple missions in the Gauntlet. Gladius is left over from Privateer. It was also the Raptor in Super Wing Commander, and it's a wide boy. But they do a good job of when you fly the Gladius, it feels wide. It has like a broad array of missiles that fire at different points in its width.
A lot of dumbfires. Maybe too many dumbfires.
It's helpful. There are points when you're doing an Armada match where you just want to shoot a bunch of dumbfires while the other guy is turning, and you can maybe get them with one or two of them. And last for the humans is, we've already seen the front of it, but it's the Banshee. This is literally the Super Wing Commander Scimitar model reused. So not only is the Phantom the Banshee, it's also the Scimitar attached to a
we have a comment. Leslie says the Gladius was a favorite to fly.
The Gladius is fun to fly.
It's fast. I'm glad that there are so many diverse opinions, because that's what you want in like a multiplayer game that has these different ships pitted against each other. Because I have my favorites, and they're different from other people's, and I guess that's good balancing for a game that's otherwise just had to be thrown together so quickly. And
yeah, Leslie James also mentioned the Arrow as a sleek design, but it kind of reminds them of the Star Wars A-Wing. And look this up when you get a chance. The A-Wing, and I saw this less than a year ago, and now I can't unsee it. The A-Wing is a kit-bashed F-14. And once you see F-14 next to an A-Wing, you see how they sliced it up, and you can't unsee it. In fact, don't look this up if you don't want to ruin the A-Wing for yourself. I love the A-Wing. I think it's a beautiful spaceship design. One of the one of my weaknesses is if I'll go to like a toy store or something and there's a toy A-Wing, I always buy it even though I don't want to be collecting them. And then I give it to them. But beautiful ship, and you can't unsee that it's just the top part of the fuselage of an F-14 Tomcat. And this is not in the manual, but I'll share it here because it's such a rare bird. The transport from Wing Commander Armada, the Confed transport.
Gotta use the transports. The transports are the secret weapon. If you don't make effective use of the transports, you're not going to win against advanced adversaries, such as real people.
And here is the Lexington, or the Confed carrier. As you can see, it does not match, the in-flight one does not match the one used in the cutscenes. The cutscenes uses the Tiger's Claw Bengal model from Super Wing Commander, and then they have kind of this rebuilt, totally retextured version for the actual in-flight stuff. Interesting. Then for the Kilrathi, everybody knows and loves the Dralthi. Again, if you look at early versions of Armada, screenshots of builds, you'll see the Wing 4 Dralthi Mark IV instead of this. So they redid the design, retextured it. It's got these cool grills on the top. It's a neat spaceship. I'm just going to say that for all of them. Let's see, and where is the Shoklar? I mean, computer, Shoklar. These are such a pain to fight when the AI flies them. I find human players aren't so effective with a Shoklar. Should we be playing the Armada selection music? One of the all-time great Weird Wing Commander songs.
The Shoklar is not super powerful, so if you're not effectively using the cloak,
yeah, it's got to be the cloak.
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, I guess it is kind of a good counterpart to the Phantom.
And here's the Drothek, as seen in Wing Commander Academy. And by the way, there's some old fan lore that Wing Commander 3's ships all look like, the Kilrathi ships are redesigned from Wing Commander 2 because the engine can't do circles. And here is proof that it's not true. This is taking a Wing Commander 2 ship that was... This and the Wraith are both Wing Commander 2 ships that were totally rounded, and they're bringing them into the Wing Commander 3 Strike Commander engine just fine.
And the Shoklar is nicely rounded.
Yeah, the Shoklar is totally round, too.
Like the Dralthi kind of, too.
It was actually just the case of them wanting an art director, the modern-style art director for the game. Here's the Corlar. It's always hard to remember whether or not it has an apostrophe in the name or a hyphen in the name. But another one that's super fun to fly because of the off-centered guns that really make it feel like something special. And the side view where you can look to the side and see the other seat. This is... If I were playing Armada to win, I would never build one of these. I would always build a Goran because the difference is so minuscule and the Goran is so much better to fly. But for the experience of it, this one is so cool. And of course we have the Goran. Big, meaty beefer. I like the Goran. It almost doesn't feel Kilrathi to some sense. It's kind of like the Star Wars Rebellion logo, if you put it like that. But
it's quite a tank. I mean, it definitely feels very substantial.
Yeah, you go up against an arrow, and you can just sit there while it pitters away at you.
Mm-hmm.
And it is highlighted. Armada had two cinematic quality renderings. One is the front of the box, and the other is the back of the box. They were both used in advertising, and that back of the box render with the Gorans is a great highlight of it. It's one of those Kilrathi ships that will never be mentioned again ever in continuity, but it sure was great when it was there. Here's the Furball transport, which almost looks like a fighter. It's again cool as hell. And we will end with the Chirac, which, and again, you won't be able to unsee this. This is the front part of a K-Mech with the wings cut off. Imagine, the K-Mech was first in Wing Commander 2, then they took the model to Privateer and retextured it in Privateer colors. Here they have just sliced off the wings, and it became the Kilrathi carrier both in this game and in Super Wing Commander, yeah. So, that is our fleet. And I just thought that would be a fun bit of technology for engaging them. Also, if you notice here in the manual, the Terran carrier picture, this is the Super Wing Commander version. It's not the version we just saw that's in the actual game. So, point that out. And with that, we have talked about an entire Wing Commander manual for far, far too long. Anybody out there have any questions before we turn in for the night? We'll be doing this again real soon.
One more thing to show off.
Oh, cool.
The UK versus the US Voices of War, they are inverted colors.
That's crazy.
Black and purple versus purple and black.
Yeah, I
never noticed this before.
I had never noticed that either. I learned that tonight. I do know this manual was widely translated. There's German, French, there's a Spanish version, there's a Korean version, there's a Japanese translation. Voices of War got translated so many places. And again, because it's a good world-building manual. Let's see.
I'll take some proper pictures when I have real lighting side by side to see the differences.
Sebastian mentions that he always thought the grills in the Dorothy were for VTOL capability. That's interesting, because one thing that always sticks out about the start of the Wing Commander 3 is how the Dorothy fly into the giant palace, and you're like, wait, can they do that? I mean, obviously they can, but...
You wonder, is it some anti-gravity technology, or do they have modern VTOL somethings?
Thank you for the kind words, Jeremy. That's very nice. You know, I actually do have one other thing that came in the mail that's not an autograph of Smudo. Let me flatten my autographs of Smudo so Lumi doesn't destroy them. But I also got, just the other day, this was an eBay grab, a Gravis Analog Pro Joystick Battle Pack that comes with Wing Commander 2. So this is one of those great old 90s joysticks, still sealed in a box with Wing Commander 2. At some point between now and when we launch the real show, we'll have a nice backdrop with all sorts of stuff, and that'll go on there. But I've said too much. Anyway.
This is a good practice stream. I bought a light, one of those podcaster lights, to go with my podcaster microphone.
Oh, nice.
And you set it up. So it's like my face is not like half in the shadow, half in the...
Oh, I'm in the same boat. Mine is over there on the floor right now. Actually, I've still got the old one. What do I look like? That seems like too much light. I think I look better in the dark. But we will talk to you all soon. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for sharing our Wing Commander love. Have a great night, everybody.
That was fun. Thank you, everybody.
Ending broadcast.